So, you know, when your spouse or partner surprises you with flowers, either they surprise you at your front door or they come to your work to surprise you. And it's just such a nice feeling, you know, having that sort of surprise and knowing that somebody is going to take time out of their day to surprise you. Well, on one morning, Lita Sullivan was having her morning coffee with her best friend when she heard a knock on the door. And when she went to open the door, it was a flower delivery man holding a big box of flowers for her. However, this wasn't just your average flower delivery, because shortly after, Lita Sullivan would be murdered. So, let's get into it. So Lita was always such a lovely girl. She was very hardworking, she was ambitious. In the year of 1976, she graduated from Spelman, and that's when she got a job working at a boutique. One day during her shift, this man walks in. He is gorgeous, and he notices Lita. And this is actually where she meets her soon-to-be husband, Jim Spellman. It was love at first sight. They got married only after a year of being together. It was like Lita's dream marriage. Not only was she madly in love with him, but he was extremely wealthy. He got his wealth through being passed down a liquor distributing business. And he ended up selling it for around $5 to $7 million around there. Back in the day when this happened, that was obviously a lot more then than it is now. But Lita was a lot more than just her wealthy husband. She had a lot going for her herself. She was well educated, she was smart, she had good connections through her family. Her mother was working in the legislature, so Lita was well off before she even knew him. So this case happens in around the 1980s in Atlanta. And Atlanta at the time, there was still a lot of segregation. You know, there was still a distinct, African Americans live here, Caucasian people live over here. It was very split up. There was a very white town called Buckhead, and it was where the wealthy and famous people lived in Atlanta. You weren't living in the neighborhood of Buckhead unless you were making millions of dollars. Buckhead was known for its lively nights, it's fine dining restaurants, it's good entertainment, you know. It was also a very tight-knit community, so everybody knew everybody. The gossip was all over, you know. The way I would describe Buckhead would be kind of like a high school clique, you know. Everybody there was financially doing well and nobody was hiding it. Everybody flaunted their wealth through their cars, their fashion, everything. So on January 26th of 1987, Lita and her best friend Poppy were having a sleepover at Lita's home. And that morning, Lita and Poppy, they go down in their morning robes, they're ready to make their morning coffee, and they're just chatting and they're having such a good morning. And that's when there was a knock on Lita's front door. So Lita goes to the front door and she answers it. And it's a flower delivery man. Poppy was in the kitchen when this was all going down, and she heard, oh my gosh, she just got flowers. And she could hear Lita offering to give him a tip for bringing him flowers. Poppy hears a loud screeching scream followed by a shotgun. Poppy just goes into shock. The first thing she does is takes cover and she hides. She ends up hiding in a closet. So that's when police get a call to Lita and James' home in Buckhead. And when they arrive, they see Lita that was shot and they see a box of flowers right beside her. And they noticed a bullet hole that went through the box of flowers. So I was so heartbroken when I found out that when the delivery man raised the gun to her, she actually had the box of flowers and she put it over her head like it would shield her from it. It was just like her instinct. And it was one shot and it went through the box and hit Lita, and she died instantly. So shortly after they see Poppy, they hear a scream coming from a closet. That's when they find Poppy, just terrified, shaking. And they talk to her and she lets them know, like, yeah, we were just having our morning coffee and I heard her tipping the flower delivery man, and then I heard a scream and a shotgun and I just hid, and I was too scared to come out until I heard you guys. And they ask her, is there anything that she knew that could help them? However, she didn't see his face, so she couldn't help them much further. So police end up scouting surrounding neighborhoods for any delivery men that are out delivering flowers. They also talk to the man that called the police. It ended up being this elderly man who was out on his driveway while this happened. He went to go pick up a newspaper at the end of his driveway, and he said that he saw the delivery man go up to Lita's door. Lita answered the door. He heard the scream, the shotgun, and the man running off. He said that it was about a 6 foot tall, stocky white man, but that was pretty much all the description that he was able to give the police. So investigators look at the flower box and they see a stamp of where the flowers came from. So they end up going to the florist and talking to him. And the guy says, yeah, I mean, there was a suspicious looking guy that bought flowers this morning. I saw him get into the car with 3 other guys. However, I don't really have any information on who they are. I don't have any surveillance footage. So this was kind of a dead end for them. So this hit the news very quickly. When a crime like this happens in Buckhead, it is a shock to everyone. Crime just doesn't happen in this neighborhood. So everybody found out very quickly and everybody was devastated. A lot of people in that neighborhood knew Lita. And this scared everyone because, you know, when a crime like this takes place so close to you, it makes you worry. And a lot of the women in this neighborhood get flowers delivered to them quite frequently. So they even worry, like, could it have been me? So police decide that they need to start somewhere. And they decided to work inwards, outwards. So let's look at the people that were closest to Lita. Police started off with her husband, James. When they talked to her husband, James, they learned that he was in Palm Beach at the time of her murders and that they're actually going through a divorce. James or Jim, he has the same name. I don't know if I said that already, but people call him both names. So James was accused of cheating. He was accused of adultery, he was accused of infidelity, and Lita served him divorce papers. They also find that about 5 years into their marriage, Lita and James moved to Florida. And in the community where they lived in Florida, they weren't really accepted that often. The people around them didn't really like them. And James felt that it was because his wife was African American. And that could very well have been the case for some of the times. However, James just wasn't really a likable person. Although there could be people that would be mean over those reasons, because sadly that's the world we live in. James didn't have the ability to self-reflect and realize that he kind of was a bit of a problem. So because of this, James decided that he was going to start seeing another woman. Then Lita found out, and she decided that she was going to escape her toxic relationship and move to Atlanta. And this is when she lived in Buckham. So James' alibi in Palm Beach ends up checking out. However, they still have some suspicions on him because that doesn't mean he didn't hire anybody. Just because he wasn't there doesn't mean he's not involved. However, they have no evidence to go much further, so police are stuck again. So police decide that they're going to look through James's phone records to see if they could find anything. And they found out that not too shortly after her murder, he had a phone call with a 404 number, which is an Atlanta area code. And it was to a payphone in Atlanta, and it lasted about 45 seconds. So this was really suspicious. They also found that James was having conversations with Lita's best friend Poppy's husband, Marvin. They didn't have that type of relationship where they talked often, so this was a little bit weird. So investigators decide that they're gonna talk to Marvin and see what the conversation was about. And Marvin said that, yeah, they didn't really talk often. However, he received a voicemail call from James saying that it was urgent, if he could please call him back. So Marvin did. Marvin said that James was concerned about the divorce and the fact that Lita was gonna get money from him since Lita signed a prenup before they got married and he was accused of adultery. Then that would make the prenup potentially not go through, so then Lita would get substantially a lot more money. Substantially a lot more money. And that he wanted the court case to be in Palm Beach, not Atlanta, because people in Atlanta didn't like him that much. He felt like the jurors weren't gonna go easy on him. Marvin said, and then 3 days after this call, that's when I found out that Lita was murdered. It couldn't have been a coincidence that Lita was murdered the morning she was scheduled to go to court for her divorce. However, there's still not enough evidence for an arrest, but time is ticking because there is a statute of limitations for contract killing, hiring somebody to kill somebody else. So they need to get enough evidence to trial James before this happens. And just days before the statute of limitations is up, police end up gathering enough evidence to bring him to court, arrest him. However, he ends up being tried not guilty and he was set free. However, Lita's family they didn't want to give up, so they decided to sue James for a civil lawsuit. And that even though he was found not guilty, he was still responsible for her death. So they took him to trial for that, and the family won, and Lita's family was granted $4 million. However, James was claiming that he was broke now, and they suspect that he was hiding his money somewhere, and he didn't pay Lita's family the $4 million. And that's when James just suddenly disappears, and he moves away. He moves to Costa Rica. The FBI knows that he is residing in Costa Rica. However, laws in America have no meaning in Costa Rica, so they can't really do anything about it. So at this point, Jim is living the millionaire lifestyle in Costa Rica. He is living his best life. He's a free man, and Lita's family were worried that he was going to get away with this forever. However, in 1998, police get a tip from a woman named Belinda saying that she knew information about Lita's death. So police go and meet with Belinda, and she lets them know, like, hey, I was in a 10-year relationship with Anthony Tony, and they lived in North Carolina. and that Anthony was arrogant, he was rude, he was abusive. He told Belinda that he murdered Lita. Lita's husband asked him to kill her. And Belinda was telling the police now, because she finally escaped her abusive relationship, the guilt was just rising in her and she wanted to relieve her guilt. Belinda tells police that Anthony headed to Atlanta to deal with business, to eliminate a woman whose husband wanted her eliminated. And when he came back from the trip, he told her that he wasn't successful and he wasn't able to get her to come to her door. And it was actually Belinda's idea that he bring flowers to the door. So then he went back, and that's when he brought the flowers. That's when Lita was murdered. So yeah. And she lets them know that he got paid $25,000 for this. Not too shortly after, he used an Atlanta payphone to call Jim/James and say, "Merry Christmas, your dreams came true. Your wife is dead." And I quote what he said. So now that they have a name, they decide to locate Anthony. And when police show up to arrest Anthony, the first thing he says to them is, "I've been waiting for you boys for a long time." That's what he says. So this is where this case starts to speed up and police start to get some traction, because Anthony basically just said everything. He just confessed. He, in the interview, was crying. He let them know, yeah, Jim hired me. He had proof that he had his phone number in his wallet. He let them know that he paid him $25,000 for it, and that he delivered flowers and called him after and let him know everything checked out. So police now have enough to go arrest Jim/James. So they let James's attorney know, and that's when he disappears from Costa Rica. Surprise, surprise. So this is about 15 years now after Lita's murder. Jim still is nowhere to be found. However, during a meeting, a police officer in Thailand hears about this case, and he recognizes him, and he lets them know, like, hey, this guy's actually in Thailand, like, I've seen him. So they quickly arrest him, and finally Jim is arrested and located. And this is in the summer of 2002, Bangkok, Thailand, finally. So they send him to the US to get trialed for murder. James/Jim was sentenced guilty and life with no parole. Finally, there was justice for Lita's family. It took 20 years for him to finally be in jail. However, I'm happy that the investigators never gave up on Lita and giving Lita's family justice. Even 20 years later, they still tried and hoped, and they never gave up that hope for Lita. And I'm glad Lita got that, because a lot of cases, investigators just fumble the bag, really. They really don't care. So it was nice to see that they never gave up on her, because she deserves that, like also with every single other victim that's dealt with that. But so that's all I have for this case, and thank you for watching. Bye.